go. Moses, sit down, read it.
I got it, man.
Good.
Don't really have it.
With the book, you don't need to be.
I had to go to the library and get what the heck.
That's why you're late. You're not late because of the handicap. You're late because you're not organized.
Thanks for extra minutes, too. I usually
Ashley, where's your pass? Is everything okay? Yes. All right. Now everybody's on page 58, 9.2, and we are going to do an expansion. Now, here's how this works. You could FOIL x plus y to the 4th power. Oh, Sam, you still owe me 50 cents. You could FOIL this out 4 times. X plus y times x plus y, x plus y, x plus y. That would take a very long time. So there's a shortcut. And here's how the shortcut works. There are going to be a bunch, if you did that, if you FOILed it all out, would you agree that there'd be a bunch of terms? Just like if you do x plus y squared, that's x plus y times x plus y, and you get x squared plus 2xy plus y squared. When you FOIL that, you get several terms. Well, the bigger that power is, the more terms you're going to get. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, each of those terms is going to have 3 pieces to it. There's going to be a coefficient, which here's 1, here's 2, here's 1. And there's going to be a power of x and a power of y. Now, you look at this and say, Mrs. Ford, there's no y in that first term. Actually, there is. Actually, this first term has 2 x's and no y's. The second term has 1 of each. And the third term has what? No x's and 2 y's. So they all have x's and y's. It's just a few of them might be a 0. All right. So each term has 3 components. I'm going to multiply this out, but I'm not really going to multiply it out. I'm just going to get the answer. Each term has 3 components. A coefficient, a power of x, and a power of y. Now, the coefficients come from something called Pascal's triangle. Pascal's triangle looks like this. Now, how did I build Pascal's triangle? Because I don't have it memorized, I'm building it. You start with 1 and 1 on the top. That's your x and y. Now, notice how on this diagonal it's all 1s, and on this diagonal it's all 1s? The middle numbers come from adding the 2 above it. So 1 and 1 gave me 2. 1 and 2 gave me 3. 1 and 3 gave me 4, 3 and 3 gave me 6, and so on. So if I want to build the next row, I know it's going to start with a 1, and then what's going to come here? 5, and then 10, 10, 5, and then ends with a 1. Let's do one more row. Starts with a 1. 6, 15, 20, 15, 6, and then ends with a 1. Always starts and ends with a 1. Now, here's the deal. We are expanding to the 4th power. Oh my gosh. We were expanding to the 4th power. Okay? So we're going to go to the 4th row of the triangle. And we're going to write down the numbers 1, 4, 6, 4, 1. Those are the 4th number, or the numbers in the 4th row. Those are our coefficients. Now, I told you every term was going to have 3 pieces. One of the pieces is the coefficients. What else does every term have? An x and a y. So I'm going to go ahead and write x and y. Every term has a coefficient, an x and a y. Now, when you FOIL this out, if you were to FOIL that out, x plus y, x plus y, x plus y, x plus y, and you multiplied all that together, your biggest power on x would be what? How many times are you multiplying it? 4. So your biggest power on x would be 4. And then it would go down 1 till you got to the end and it was 0. So I started with 4 on my x. Why did I start with 4? Because I'm raising to the 4th power. And they go down. 4, then 3, then 2, then 1, then 0. What do you think the y powers do? The same thing, but the other direction. So this would be 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Now notice, in each term, what do the exponents add up to?
4.
Always. The exponents will add up to that. All right, so let's start over again. Where did I get the coefficients? Where did those numbers come from? From the 4th row of Pascal's triangle. If I'd been expanding to the 5th power, if this had been a 5, I would use the 5th row. I use the 4th row. Now, every term has an x and a y. How did I put the powers on? What did I do with my x's? Sam?
I was going to ask about
How did I get my x powers here? I started with 4 and I counted down, just went right down in order. And then how did I do my y's? Same thing, but the other direction. So that in the end, all of the exponents in every term, the exponents add up to 4. Now, these are the individual terms. So now we have to simplify. Look at this first term. What is anything to the 0 power? 1. So it's like you don't even need to worry about it. So what's that first term? It's just x to the 4th. And what's my next term? 4 x cubed y and 6 x squared y squared and 4xy cubed And what's that last term? Just y to the 4th. Now I know that took a long time to do because that was our first example, but really you're going to get so fast at this. We just FOILed that out 4 times. That's the answer that you would get if you FOILed that out 4 times. Okay? And we're going to try another one here. All right, so Sam, what was your question?
Is the Pascal's triangle the same every time? Is that just,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, that is Pascal's triangle.
Okay, yeah.
Do you always start with 1?
Yes. All right, so now we're doing x plus 2y to the 3rd. Now, what's going to be different about this one? Well, we're going to get our coefficients, but this time our coefficients are not going to be the circled numbers. What are our coefficients going to be? 1, 3, 3, 1. Because this time we're going to get them from the 3rd row. So 1, 3, 3, 1. Now, do you remember how in the last problem it was x plus y to the 4th? So once I got my coefficients written down, every term then got an x and a y. Okay, this time every term is going to get an x, but then every term is going to get a 2y. Not just a y this time. This time it's a 2y. So every term gets the 2 parts of the problem. An x and a 2y. Does that make sense? So in the next one, look at letter C. We're going to do it in a minute. But every term is going to get what? A 2x and a negative y. We'll do that in a minute. But let's finish this one. All right, what's still missing? What have I not taken care of?
Exponents.
Exponents. Now, always start right here with your x's. That's going to be 3, and you're going to count down. And then, once you're down here, start with your y's going the other direction. And what's our little built-in check? Every term, the exponents should add up to 3. If you've done it right, every term, the exponents are going to add up to 3. Does that look okay to everybody? All right, now, here are the individual terms. So now we got to simplify. This is where you have to be careful. Let's look at the first term. Anything to the 0 power is 1. So this first term is just x cubed, right? Now be careful on the next term. You have a 3 and a 2. So 6x squared y. Now if that freaked you out, the next one's really going to get you, because the next one is 12xy squared. Why 12?
2 times
2 squared. Yeah. 2 squared is 4 times 3. That's where we got the 12. And what's that last one going to be? 8y to the 3rd. Remember, when you put those powers on, those powers go with the 2 also. So this is 2 squared and this is 2 cubed. And there's your answer. Jamal?
So I understand the triangle and stuff like that, but I'm having trouble like which numbers get placed where.
If you're expanding to the 3rd power, you use the 3rd row. You just write out the 3rd row in the triangle.
Okay.
And if I were doing the 4th power,
I know, and then so where do you get the 3 and 0?
those are exponents. And x to the 3rd, because I start with 3 because I'm expanding the 3rd power, and then I count down.
Okay.
Lexi?
So for C, you would use the fifth.
Yeah, we're gonna do C next. All right, let's try C, problem C. All right, so here we go. All right, so what do I start with? I take the fifth row of the triangle. So here we go. Fifth row of the triangle. 1, 5, 10, 10, 5, 1. There's the fifth row of the triangle. Lots of terms. Now, what does every term have besides a number? Every term's going to have a coefficient. You got that. What else is it going to have? It's going to have a 2x and a negative y. So I'm going to write 2x and negative y next to every single one of these numbers. All right, so once we get our row written down, and how do we know which row to use? The power. It couldn't be any more obvious. Whatever the power is, that's the row to use. Once you get your row written down, then what do? You put these two things, whatever they are, these two things next to every one of those numbers. Okay, is everybody with me? Now, the only thing left is the exponents. Now, how do we do the exponents? What are we going to start with? 5. Right here on the x's, we're going to put a 5. And then what's going to happen to those exponents? They're going to go down all the way to 0. And then what happens to the y exponents? They do the same thing, but the other direction. And what is my little built-in check? In every term, the exponents should add up to 5. And they do. All right, so what am I left to do now? All that's left is what? Look at each term and simplify it. So what do I have here in the beginning? Be very careful. It'd be 32x to the 5th. Why is it 32x to the 5th? Because 2 to the 5th, right, is 32. Now what happened to this part? It just equals 1. Anything to the 0 power is 1. So it's just gone. Okay, now look at this one. You are multiplying. Did someone say 80? You're right, but it's actually negative 80. Why is it negative 80? Because you have a 5, a 2 to the 4th, which is 16, and a negative. And you are multiplying those. This is all multiplied. So 5 times 16 times negative 1 is negative 80. X to the 4th y. Right, now what about the next one? What do we have here? It's not negative this time. This time it's positive. Why is it positive? It is 80 again. But why is it positive? Because when you square a negative, it becomes positive. So you have 10. 2 to the 3rd is 8. and then y squared. How about the next one? No, it won't be 80 this time, but it will be negative. It will be negative 40 x squared y cubed. Why is it negative 40? Well, you have a 10, you have a 2 squared, and you have a negative cubed. A negative cubed is a negative, right? So we have a 10, a 4, and a negative. Negative 40. How about the next one? 10x y to the 4th. Why is this term positive? Because it's y to the 4th. And when you raise to an even power, negatives get positive. And what's our very last term? Minus y to the 4th. Remember, anything that is zero power is 1, so it's just gone. All right? We'll practice another one here at the end of the period, but I need to get through these next 3 problems. Now, let's take a look at the next 3 problems. These are much easier because instead of asking for every term, it's asking for only one particular term. All right? Unfortunately, look at the very first problem. It is 2x plus y to the 11th power. Oh my goodness. The 11th power. So I'm going to build Pascal's triangle to the 11th row. It's going to be big. So help me out. What's the next row? 1, 4, 6, 4, 1. 1,
5, 10, 5, 15, 20, 7,
21, 35, 35, 21, 7, 1. 28, 56. Oh my goodness gracious. There is a shortcut. Oh,
they get like a take test, like so much.
Some people like to do Pascal's triangle, and it will always, always work. Of course, you gotta add right. I'm not sure I'm adding right. I hope I'm adding right. Now, I'm gonna stop there. I have a sheet here that says I want the 5th term. I don't need the whole row. I only need the 5th term. So I'm not going to write out the rest of the row. I'm just going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That would be the coefficient I would need, right? Everybody agree? So I'm gonna write down my 330. Now, what are the two parts of this problem? Not x and y, 2x and y. All right, now pay attention. If you wrote out the whole row, like we did in our last problems, if we had it all written out, what would be the power on the 2x in the very first term? 11. And then it would go down to 10, and then down to 9, and so on, right? So let's count. This term, if I wrote out the whole row, this term, the power on x would be 11. 10, 9, 8, 7. So the power on my 2x is 7. And I got that just by counting down. It says I only want the fifth term. So in the first term, this would be the first term. The power would be to the 11th. And then it goes down to 10, 9, 8, 7. Now, we are raising this to the 11th power. So what do we know about these two exponents? They should add up to 11. That means that if we have counted and gotten 7 here, then this has to be what? 4. Now all we need to do is simplify it. So we've got a 330. Okay, now be careful. That's not a 2. What is it? It's 2 to the 7, which is 128. And so now I have to take 330 times 128. So my final answer is this. Now, that is just one term of the sequence. Instead of having to do all the terms, we only found one of them. Now, those of you that have calculators, would you get your calculators out and calculate that for me? Tell me what you get when you type in on your calculator 11C7. So somebody said, is there a shortcut? You know, if I'm only doing the first few rows, this is not a big deal. But oh my goodness, if I have to go all the way to 11, is there a shortcut to get those numbers? And the answer is yes. Okay, so you can pay attention to this or not pay attention to this. Somehow you have to come up with 330. You can come up with it in the triangle. So if that makes sense to you and you're comfortable with it, go with it. The other way you can come up with it is to use your combinations. The first number in the 11th row will be 11C11. The second number will be 11C10, 11C9, 11C8, 11C7. This would be 11C6, 11C5, 11C4, all the way down to 11C0. If you wanted a number in the 12th row, then it would be 12C, whatever.
Wait, how do you find out that it's like 7?
So how did you know?
I counted down. This is 11C11, 11C10, 9, 8, 7.
Oh, so you just work.
I have to count down to the fifth term. I need the fifth term. So 11C11, 10, 9, 8, 7. It has to be 11C7. I count.
So in the 11th row, there's 11 numbers, and the 10th, there's 10.
No, look, how many numbers are in the fourth row?
About 5.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just add 1.
No, yeah, there's one more, because you go from 11C11 all the way down to 11C0. All right, let's try the next one. Oh, the next one's a little bit tricky. It says, if you were going to FOIL that out, there would be a term that had an X to the 4th and a Y to the 6th in it. Does that make sense to you? That in the list of terms, one of them would have those exponents. Absolutely, because they add up to 10. Right? There would be lots of terms, but one of them would be this. Now the question is, what's the coefficient? Well, I've got my triangle written out, so I'm going to use it. The 10th row, in the 10th row, which is right here, what would, if you wrote out every term, not just this one, but every term, what would be the power on X here? X to the 10th. And this one would be X to the 9th, 8th, 7th, 6th, 5th, 4th. Isn't that the one I want? So it says, what is the coefficient? The coefficient is 210. And I didn't do one single magical thing, I counted. Because I know that if I did the whole expansion, the power on X right here would be 10. And it goes down every term. I need it to be 4. So I just counted down until it got to be 4. And that's it. One more. We want the third term of this expansion. Now, which row of the triangle will I look at? The 5th. So here's the 5th row. I'm looking at the 5th row. If I were doing the whole expansion, I'd write down the whole row. I don't want the whole row. I want only the third term. So this would be the coefficient on the first term. This would be the coefficient on the second term. So this is the number I want, right? That's the coefficient on the third term. Now what else does the third term have besides a 10?
X.
It has a 2x and a 3y. Remember, every term has a coefficient, this and this. Now I need my powers. If I did the whole thing, what would be the power on the x's right here? 5. And then it would go down to 4. And so the term I want, the x power is 3. Which means the y power is 2, because these have to add up to 5. Right? Now we're going to simplify. So we have a 10. All right, this is all multiplied. So what do we have here?
8x.
8x cubed. What do we have here? 9y
It
squared.
says that it was the third term, so we have to go 1,
So we're gonna multiply 10 times 8 times 9, 720, x cubed y squared is the answer. All right, now I want you to try one in your partner groups, in your tables there. I want you to try one problem. Your expansion is x minus 3y to the 6th. And I want you to find the third term. Okay? So right now with your partner, see if you can find the third term of that expansion. Now remember, it's going to have three pieces, right? It's going to have a coefficient, an x, and a negative 3y. All right, so take a minute and see if you can find that, or do that.
How did you find the exponents? You got the coefficient, but how do you do the exponents? They like talking about the times.
All right, I need, if you're still confused by this, I need you paying very close attention. Should not be still confusing us. Which row of the triangle will I look? The 6th. Now, I don't want the whole row. Sometimes I want the whole row and I have to write on all those numbers. I don't. I want only the third term. So here we go. Here's the 6th row. I count. 1, 2, 3. There's the number that I want. That's the third number in the row. So I write down the 15. Next to the 15, I have an x and a negative 3y. Those are the two pieces of my problem. My problem will always have two pieces, and I will always write down those two pieces. Now I'm going to put my exponents on. I know that if I were to write out the whole row, I'm looking at the 6th row. If I were to write out the whole row, the power on the x's right here would be 6. Because the x's start with that number every time. So this would be x to the 6th. What would this one be? 5. And this one would be 4. And that's the one I want. So it's going to be x to the 4th. Now, if that's a 4, then what does that have to be?
2.
A 2, because these have to add up to 6. Now I simplify. So I have a 15. That's just x to the 4th. All right, what's this?
It's 9.
That's 9y squared. And it's positive because you squared the negative out. 15 times 9 is 135. X to the 4th y squared. How many got that right? Okay, those of you that didn't, kids, it is not that hard. We just went through all the steps. Your homework tonight is in your book. I would suggest you try it.